Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are the obvious wide receivers to rank 1 and 2, but the wide receiver 3 spot is wide open for grabs, and Vinnie and I disagree on who should take that spot. We dig into our top 15 fantasy wide receiver rankings for 2025 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. We are going to start our wide receiver ranks for this upcoming season. Today, we're just going to go through the top 15, and then tomorrow we'll do the next section of 16 through 30 or so, and then we'll get even deeper on Friday's episode to finish up our wide receiver rankings. We did running backs on Monday and Tuesday, so if you missed those episodes, you can go listen. Let's just dig right into these and start right at the top. It's no surprise we have Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson 1 and 2, both of us. There's really not much to talk about there. They're elite. They're great. Justin Jefferson, I guess, is a little bit more risky than Chase because he has another new quarterback, but he's shown it time and time and again. It doesn't really matter who throws the ball to him. So where it starts to get interesting is wide receiver 3. And we actually have these two guys pretty much swapped in our rankings. So I have Nico Collins at wide receiver 3, while you have him at wide receiver 7. You have Puka Nacua at wide receiver 3. I am at wide receiver 5. Vinny, why do you feel good about Puka as the next best wide receiver outside of those top 2 elite guys? And are you worried about Matthew Stafford's back injury or Devontae Adams, being there taking away targets? That's kind of what made me not want to put him all the way at 3.
Well, I think there's a parallel to be drawn between this offense and the Bengals offense. I mean, there's a correlation with Zach Taylor and Sean McVay. And you look at the weaponry on both these offenses, it really is a drop-off when you get to tight end. Okay, you have Tyler Higbee and Mike Gesicki, and then you get to wide receiver 3, which is a question mark. That means the 2 main receivers are going to dominate targets. And the thing about Cooper Kupp, he wasn't on the field a lot recently for the Rams as he faded. The decline was there. The injuries happened, right? Devontae Adams, I have not seen a true drop-off from him, and he's a little different, right? Cooper Kupp is mainly a slot guy. Devontae Adams can line up inside, but he's also someone who's going to attract attention from top corners on the outside. So I just am bullish on the Rams offense in general. I think this combination is really what Sean McVay wanted if he was going to move on from Cooper Kupp, get Adams and Nacua, and really it's a matchup nightmare all over the field, all the way through the red zone with both these guys. And Nacua, again, he's the explosive young receiver. Adams, again, finished in the top 10 when you look at the average. Last year, he was very close to it in most formats if he wasn't there. So he was just kept producing, and this combination, I think it's kind of the cheaper, slightly cheaper, I won't say it's all that much cheaper, than Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I mean, it's very similar vibes to me where, again, Stafford, I get, is older. Joe Burrow is in his prime and all that. But I have just a lot of confidence in this Rams system with McVay getting the weapons he needs. And sometimes it's nice that it's simple, right? It's Nacua, it's Adams, a lot of Kyren Williams running, and there's not a lot of complications here on where our fantasy production is going to be. So that's why I think Nacua can have his best season yet here, scoring a few more touchdowns, still being a guy that stretches the field, makes a lot of big plays, because Adams is going to attract the type of corners that may have tried to handle him in the past more so than the inside guys.
Yeah, I mean, the corners are definitely going to have to concentrate on Adams too, which should help out Puka. And I obviously really like Puka Nacua still, even with Adams, with the worries with Stafford. Now, if it's Jimmy Garoppolo throwing the ball, that's going to be a whole different scenario. I mean, we already saw that with Adams, and Garoppolo did not go well. Adams did not like getting passes from Garoppolo in Las Vegas there. But if it's Stafford, they should both be great. I am with you. Now, I went with Nico Collins at wide receiver 3 because he's just been so good these last 2 years. Now, I know he never got up to wide receiver 3. He's wide receiver 6 on average in both of the last 2 seasons. But prior to getting that hamstring injury last year, he was like just impossible to stop. He's getting so many targets, 8, 10, 10, 15, consistently putting up well over 100 receiving yards. Even in that week 5 game when he got hurt on the first drive, he already had that long bomb touchdown that he got hurt on, but already 2 receptions for 78 yards. From weeks 1 through 5, he was averaging 18 fantasy points per game. Now, the last 7 games of the season when he came back, it wasn't as dynamic and just he didn't thrive as much, but I really expect him to be the top target for CJ Stroud this year with a bunch of rookies working next to him. So really excited about Nico Collins this upcoming year. For our wide receiver 4, we both have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's just consistent. Every year he's going to be right around wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5, and be fantastic. But then it gets dicey again, where there's some risks involved here. I have Puka Nacua 5, CeeDee Lamb 6. You don't have CeeDee Lamb listed until quite a while here. We'll get to that in a minute. But you do have Brian Thomas Jr. as a top 5 wide receiver. You have him as your wide receiver 5. I have him wide receiver 7. Why do you have more confidence in Brian Thomas Jr. than a guy like Nico Collins or CeeDee Lamb?
Well, I think, again, the offensive upside, I'm buying into it. And a lot of it, I think this year, I'm buying into a lot of the offensive vibes and where the arrow is pointing, right? I mean, the Texans' arrow is pointing a little bit down. I'm not dumping Nico Collins that far, but because he's going to dominate the targets. But I'm also looking at these offenses that are pointing way up. And we saw with Liam Cohen what the explosive results could be in Tampa. And you got to consider this being almost as big as Ben Johnson when he went to the Lions. I think he can have the same type of effect coming over to the Jaguars because they needed somebody creative, right? Doug Peterson was a little bit boring with the way they move things around. I think this team is going to be very useful with its big play weapons. Brian Thomas Jr. is its alpha, right? And they're going to have to use him. And you have Travis Hunter playing off him. That's someone you have to account for. You have to just see the progressions coming here for Liam Cohen, that Trevor Lawrence is probably going to have his best season. If that's the case, then Thomas is in business here, right? He's playing that Mike Evans role, which has been very fruitful in the Cohen offense, right? So I just see a receiver that's ascending. He's really talented, can do everything. I think he even showcased more ability than we even imagined last year, where he can play everywhere on the field, make big plays. So I'm just excited about the player and the player combination of the system. And I think Trevor Lawrence, you're going to see more of why Trevor Lawrence was drafted number 1 this year in this offense.
And we need to see that, right? If he's actually ever going to prove us anything, it has to be this year. I mean, we kind of said that last year. We're giving him another year of grace, but he really needs to prove he can be a top 10 quarterback in this league. I'm not even talking about just for fantasy, just in general, and hitting a lot of what Brian Thomas did last year when he was absolutely dominant for fantasy wasn't with Trevor Lawrence. A lot of that was with Mac Jones. So that's also a risk, but I'm high on Brian Thomas Jr. too. I have him wide receiver 7, which is about normal with consensus, only 2 spots after you. You're also very high on Malik Nabers at wide receiver 6. We'll talk about him in a moment, but I want to get to CeeDee Lamb because I have him as my wide receiver 6. You're all the way down on him at wide receiver 11, but both of us are low on him because in consensus rankings and in ADP, he is going as the wide receiver 3. So we will discuss why we're lower on him as our podcast right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football is back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, Vinnie and I are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, as always, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Our leagues have been running through Yahoo for a while now because it's a very easy setup, a great mobile app to utilize during the season. I just love how easy their message board is, just to have fun conversations with my league mates all season long. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all began yesterday on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. All right, let's continue these rankings. As I mentioned before that break, CeeDee Lamb, you have him all the way down at wide receiver 11. I'm also down on him at wide receiver 6, but I couldn't put him much lower than that just because, yeah, we do think he's going to lose out on some targets to George Pickens, but he's still going to be a target hog. And this team is going to have to pass a ton. They lost a lot of pieces just all over the place. They still don't have a run game that I trust in. So I still think the targets, it's not going to be 180 like he saw in 2023. That's why I don't think he has the upside to be a top 3 guy. But I still think he can finish in that wide receiver 5 to 8 range. So I have him there at 6. Last year, he was the wide receiver 8 in total points, wide receiver 11 on average, after being the wide receiver 1 in 2023. But in the games with Dak Prescott, he was much better than the games without him last year. So, Vinny, why are you so down on CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, I just like a lot of those players we mentioned ahead of him a lot better. I mean, you can't ignore that Thomas and Malik Nabers are ascending players, as well as Lad McConkey. These are rising stars. And then T. Higgins also didn't play a complete season, and he was on his way to a massive season with Joe Burrow. So there's some guys that we have to consider a little bit more that can really produce what we're looking for. And CeeDee Lamb has never been a big touchdown guy, and some of that has come into play here with what I've ranked with Brown and Higgins, especially. I think Thomas and Nabers could also have good scoring totals. I think Lad McConkey will be more active in scoring as well. So I think with Lamb, I mean, you do have to count that George Pickens is on the field and the healthy Jake Ferguson. All these things were not there. And then I get it. The quarterback situation was not ideal and far from ideal with Dak Prescott going down. But again, I think we may have seen the peak season of CeeDee Lamb in terms of production. I don't know how much higher you can go with the volume that's going to come. I don't necessarily see that same volume. And I also am not feeling totally into the Brian Schottenheimer version of this offense either. So I feel like he's going to botch a lot of things up and maybe try to spread it around a little too much. Anyway, like, it's not really an affront against CeeDee Lamb. I just like a lot of these guys ahead of him a little bit better with their trajectory right now in their particular offenses, and things change, right? We didn't have, when CeeDee Lamb was finishing at that high rate, we didn't have Nabers or Thomas in this league, right? So those are 2 guys right there. And A.J. Brown is pretty consistent. And again, his rank says that's about where he was average-wise, right, for the Eagles. So really the one guy you might question is, okay, McConkey, but Higgins definitely was up there. He was the wide receiver 3. So it's really not an affront or anything against CeeDee Lamb. I just think there's an embarrassment of riches at the top of the wide receiver leaderboard, and you're going to have a real special season to get back to wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I don't see. I'm shocked that he's just so easily being, continually ranked as wide receiver 3 across so many platforms, holding on to that ADP. Because I mean, the last 2 out of the last 3 years, he's pretty much averaged the same numbers: 14.2, 14.6. That 2023 year, I think, was the outlier year. Now, you're going to be happy with 14.6 points per game if you drafted him anywhere around wide receiver 11 or even wide receiver 6. You'll be fine with that. But when you're drafting him at wide receiver 3, that's just not going to make you too happy with that. So, I think right now he's being overdrafted, but I'm still going to hold steady at 6. Now, like we mentioned earlier, I have Brian Thomas Jr. at 7. You had him at 5. This is where we get to Malik Nabers. You have Malik Nabers all the way at 6. I have him at 8. And I mean, in consensus rankings, he is wide receiver 6 right now in average draft position. So you are going more with, what the fantasy industry is leaning at. I am a little bit lower. I love Malik Nabers. I think his talent's amazing. I think he's going to be the clear target hog like he was last year with 170 targets. I'm worried about Russell Wilson. I'm worried about their schedule. I'm worried about, them moving on from Russell Wilson, going to Jackson Dart, the rookie. The 3 games that maybe we get with Jameis Winston are going to be the most beautiful things we've ever seen in life with Malik Nabers. He's going to get like 25 targets and 200 yards each game. But I think just the quarterback position makes me just a tad bit nervous to put him too much higher. What are your thoughts on Malik Nabers?
Yeah, I think that's the only real concern we have. I mean, with the talent's far off the charts here, and really, it's the one real quarterback concern if we dig through this in terms of is there any real worry about some of these other guys? Not as much, right? I mean, of those highly ranked guys, he is the guy with the biggest question mark because again, we don't know what we're going to get not only from Russell Wilson, but if they change quarterbacks, what's going to happen. But Malik Nabers also was used to a cycle of quarterbacks that we forget wasn't very good last year either. I mean, yeah, we can say Russell Wilson is a little bit like off, right? And the way he throws and not forcing things in the middle of the field, the way he might have been a little bit more confident in his overall game when he was with the Seahawks, but he's still an upgrade over what they had. Even Winston is an upgrade because they're going to put the ball in the hands of the number one receiver. So when I look at it, I think they'll move Malik Nabers around. I think Brian Dable and Mike Kafka are smart enough to realize he has to be the centerpiece of the offense and the focal point of the passing game. So when we look at that, I mean, you want to throw anything out there where he's going to be a target monster. So I could see Malik Nabers being like that CeeDee Lamb season where they're going to target him that many times. I mean, more than 10 times per game easily. I could see that definitely develop here with these quarterbacks. So I do, again, I like Nabers' upside a little bit more. I mean, at some point, Michelle, I'll be called an LSU homer if I did it, but then I could somehow see Chase, Jefferson, Nabers, and Thomas in some combination being the top four in fantasy for a few years to come.
That would be really awesome. Actually, I kind of want to see that. Moving on through our rankings here, you have A.J. Brown at 8. I am at 9. So we're both comfortable with him getting back into the top 10 after, somewhat of a down year last year. He was wide receiver 18 in total points. He missed 4 games, wide receiver 13 on average. What's interesting, though, is he actually averaged more points per game last year than in 2023 when he was the wide receiver 7 in average in 2023. So, it was pretty much a very similar season. In the games that Jalen Hurts had to actually throw, A.J. Brown was absolutely amazing. He averaged 18.2 points per game. Whenever, Jalen Hurts had like 30 plus pass attempts in a game, whenever that happened, A.J. Brown got his fair share of targets, 8 plus targets, and was fantastic. It's just, will they stick with running so much this year? I don't see too much changing, right? Like they should still be a good run team. They should still have a good defense. So I feel comfortable with him as a top 10 wide receiver, but not putting him up any higher than, lower, closer to that wide receiver 10. I have him at 9, 8. You have him at 8. I think that's a fair ranking for him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a special guy all around when he's into it. And once they got him going in the second half, I mean, you saw what he did. And he's just always going to be up and down a little bit with the targets. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the offense. I mean, sometimes they try to take him away with double teams and get Devonta Smith involved. Sometimes Devonta Smith disappears from a game, right? So there's going to be some of that, almost because the Eagles are victim of their own success, where some games they're not going to just chuck it up for Brown and Smith when they're just pounding away with Hurts and Barkley and winning these games, right? And that's why Dallas Goedert only is used in has a spike in games when that particular matchup calls out to them. So when I look at A.J. Brown again, he's pretty consistent. I think the momentum is there from the Super Bowl where they're not going to revert to bad habits of forgetting about him. They're going to put it up to him, even if he's got some challenging matchups or two guys trying to bracket him in coverage. So I really think A.J. Brown, again, when you add it up, the Eagles should know this number when Brown and Smith and Hurts and Barkley were all in the field last year. They did not lose a game all the way through the Super Bowl. So that's all I'm going to say. It's like when those guys are humming and playing together, the Eagles are almost unstoppable offensively and defensively.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think it's going to be up and down the season, inconsistent. But at the end of the year, I do think he finishes top 10 there. Talking about A.J. Brown. Now, moving on to finish up our top 10 wide receiver rankings here. I have Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 10. You have T. Higgins. Let's hit on Tyreek Hill. You're a little bit lower on Hill. Right now, Tyreek Hill is going around wide receiver 12 in average draft position. We're kind of like sandwiched that. So I have him at wide receiver 10. You have him at wide receiver 14 in your rankings. My thing with Tyreek Hill is I just don't think he's done. I think last year was a bad season overall with injuries, with how the season started when he got arrested, like before the game, with Tua getting injured, with the Dolphins offense just being a mess. I think all those things had to play into it. He's still 30 years old. Like, I still think he has another year or two in his prime. We're 1 year removed from him being the wide receiver 1 in 2023, wide receiver 3 in 2022. And in the 5 games last year that he actually played with Tua and he saw at least 8 targets, he averaged 17.7 points per game in half PPR. That would have, that's good enough for wide receiver 2 already right there. I think as long as Tua stays healthy, he's going to get his targets and be completely fine. And he'll get back to maybe not wide receiver 1, but definitely top 10.
Yeah, I'm just overall talk about another offense. I've talked a lot about I'm not feeling the Packers or Texans. This is another offense. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this just 2 years removed from what we saw from the Dolphins when they were scoring 70 points on people and like made it look easy. But this offense has been trending in the wrong direction. And I don't know if Mike McDaniel's got a little gun shy with Tua after all the injuries and just trying to get the ball out of his hands quickly and not sit back and look for the big plays downfield. I think there was a self-compression of the offense, so to speak, where they said, we need to protect our quarterback. Their defense is actually a pretty decent unit, even after probably making the mistake of the Brian Flores era, just moving on. Like, they've been actually pretty good, and they probably wish they had Vic Fangio back, but there's still some parts there. So I think they're trying to be in this weird conservative shell. Like, you didn't see that. And I think a lot of these teams now, we saw a lot of this, that they're using pre-snap motion, so it's not shocking teams as much. Where when they were moving Tyreek Hill like he was an arena football player before and everyone couldn't follow him and everything was discombobulated, I think people have caught up a little bit to Mike McDaniel's type of offense, and he hasn't really worked his way out of it, right? He was innovative, but he hasn't pushed his way to like, I'm not a wrinkle to be one step ahead. So that's my concern, right? Is he going to be able to scheme Hill and Waddle open the way he would want if they're being careful with Tua? So really, this is not on Tyreek, but it's a little bit about the schematics of the Dolphins and just also factoring in he's 30 years old.
That's all fair. We have, we're going to get through the rest of our top 15 rankings, but let's hear from another one of our sponsors before we do that.
All right, this episode, Locked On Fantasy Football, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. Well, I have good news because we also have preseason week 1. I know we had the Hall of Fame game between the Chargers and Lions, but a full slate of NFL action is coming at you here. You're already following this action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. And FanDuel, you can really make it easy on yourself to track your favorite matchup. The app is going to keep it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events, or even preseason games like must-watch events. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay, watching a bet ride in the 9th inning or the 4th quarter, FanDuel makes it feel like you're part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started now. All right, Michelle, time to close the show and dive deeper into our rankings 1 through 15 for wide receivers, preseason redraft leagues here. Now, there's one guy that we're a little bit different on as well, and it's Ladd McConkey. I talked about him briefly earlier in the show. I have him all the way up at number 9. You have him at 14. Now, what are your thoughts just on McConkey in general in this Chargers offense in year 2 under Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh?
I really like Ladd McConkey, and I do think he's going to get a ton of targets. It does scare me if they end up signing Keenan Allen back because I think Allen still has a little bit left. Like, I know he's not going to be the player he was in 2023, getting as many targets as he got from Justin Herbert if he does come back. But he showed last year with the Bears, he still has it. So, I mean, the thing with Ladd McConkey last year was he was the main guy. He was getting a gazillion targets and ended his season so great. Last year, he was a wide receiver 18 on average. It definitely was better over the second course of the season. when he really started to get hot, get all the targets. But I really think it's Keenan Allen maybe coming back that's kind of making me force him down. If he doesn't end up signing, I might put him up a couple spots, but I still can't get him into the top 12 just yet.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit over buzzing on McConkey, and there are some people like Trey Harris, of course, later as a deep sleeper, the rookie they took in the draft out of Ole Miss. So there are some things in this passing game, but again, we saw Will Dissly was involved a lot in the first drive. I don't know if they have a lot of weapons that they want to go to. Now they've been talking up some of these younger guys as well, right? We've heard a lot of buzz on their later draft picks on top of Harris. So we'll see, right, if all that materializes. But I think McConkey and Herbert have that established connection here all the field. I'm not sure, again, the Chargers are going to adjust their passing volume all that much with Greg Roman. We've seen in the past, like they usually have one busy target. In the Ravens case, it was Mark Andrews with the quarterback, and then everything else kind of funneled after that, right, to different people trickle down. So I'm hoping that McConkey just dominates things, and maybe I have him up at 9 because maybe I think he's the new CeeDee Lamb this year. So again, just I'm a youthful upside type of guy. I look at a few years guys in the league, and then I'm just going to look at the shinier models. For better or for worse, I like the second-year players, third-year players. But look, they've often come through for me, so I can't doubt that.
To run through our rankings here, 11 through 15, this is how mine goes. It starts at wide receiver 11, T. Higgins, 12, Jackson Smith-Njigba, 13, Mike Evans, 14, Ladd McConkey, 15, Garrett Wilson. Yours from 11 to 15 goes CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Jackson Smith-Njigba. So we both have T. Higgins as a top 11 wide receiver. You fit him right in there at wide receiver 10. I have him at wide receiver 11. Listen, he was the wide receiver 4 in fantasy points per game last year. He's going to catch a bunch of touchdowns. He's going to be the second target to Joe Burrow in an offense that's going to throw a ton with a bad defense. Is there much more to say about T. Higgins?
Probably not. I mean, okay. He's just underrated. I think just because of Jamar Chase, he gets overshadowed a little bit. Oh, he's the second fiddle, but on a lot of teams, he would be the number 1. So let's be honest. And he was the number 1 for a brief period of time there until they blew it out of the water with Chase and had that opportunity. So again, he got paid, so there's going to be no moping about, and he's going to play hard this season.
Now, we talked a little bit about Devontae Adams when we were talking about Puka Nacua at the top of the show, but he makes your top 12. So you're super high in Puka. You're really high in Adams. You're just high on this Rams offense in general. I have Adams at wide receiver 16. I think he probably too low for him, honestly, because last year, a down year for him, and he was still the wide receiver 10 on average. And that was with, a really down year to start the season, because from weeks 9 through 18, he was back to being who he's always been. He was a wide receiver 4 on average, averaging 16.8 points per game, behind only Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, and T. Higgins during that span. And he will be 33 years old this season in December. But with Puka now also to take some coverage off of him, I think that helps him in his older age. So I don't actually mind your ranking at top 12. But I was just a little bit lower.
Yeah, and he's a guy we've seen can also take over seasons with touchdowns easily, right? That was his calling card before, and now he's actually become more dangerous in a lot of other aspects of his game as we've gone forward. Again, he proved last year it didn't matter the quarterback situation, offense, being yanked around to 2 teams, he was going to produce, and I think he's going to love Sean McVay calling the shots for him this year. So I'm excited to see what that looks like with Adams and Nacua.
Now, to finish up our top 15 here, you had Jackson Smith-Njigba right at wide receiver 15. He made it into my top 12 at wide receiver 12. I will say I'm nervous, though, and I wanted to ask you, do you think he's one of the riskier picks here in the top 15 because of the change at quarterback? Because of the change, they get rid of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but they bring in Cooper Kupp, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, draft a couple guys. They did also get rid of Noah Fant. So there should be plenty of targets that are around. We saw Sam Darnold feed Justin Jefferson just fine last year and Jordan Addison. So do you have concerns with JSN, or do you feel safe to have him in your top 15?
Yeah, I feel pretty safe about it because he is going to get key targets. And you look where Cooper Kupp is going, he's way down there. I'm a little surprised, right? It's still Cooper Kupp. He's going back to Washington. I still think he could have some value left, but he's look, people are just down on him, right? They feel like, okay, we got our Cooper Cup Triple Crown season, it was over, and that's it. He's going downhill from there, and then the injuries and age have caught up to him quite a bit. So I think that comes into play, but they also don't have a lot, right? I mean, this is much like the Rams and Bengals. I mean, right now, it looks pretty bad. I think Torrey Horton is their third receiver. You have now A.J. Barner is your top tight end, and the rookie Elijah Arroyo looks like he's going to have an opportunity there. But there's a big, steep drop off at wide receiver on this team. So I think Darnold is going to streamline it. They're going to have 3 targets here. Keep in mind the new offense as well with Clint Kubiak, so a little bit of familiarity with Darnold and making that transition. So I'd say, yeah, I think he's fine. I don't know if he's got a higher ceiling than 15 to 12 where we've got him right now.
Yeah, his issue is he's definitely a volume guy. He needs a ton of targets to get it done. We don't know if the touchdowns will come this year with Sam Darnold, but so yeah, in the 11 games, he had fewer than 10 targets. All JSN average was 10.5 points per game. And that was including a lot of weeks late in the season, 12, 13, 14, 17, and 18. And those weeks, he did not have good fantasy games whatsoever. In the 6 games that he saw double-digit targets, he killed it, 23 points per game. We'll see if he can get that volume. Defenses might be able to just focus in on him. That could also be a concern. So I do think he's a riskier pick, but I do have him at wide receiver 12 for now. We'll get to the rest of our wide receiver rankings this week. We're going to get to the next, couple tiers next episode tomorrow on Thursday, and then finish up with deeper wide receiver rankings on Friday. Don't miss that. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.